Welcome to the Redirect Podcast. My name is Abigail Hughes.
And I'm Emily Rojas. The Redirect Podcast is a show where we shift the conversation back to books. We discuss themes from some of our favorite books and how those themes show up in real lived experiences.
On today's episode, we interview #1 best-selling author of the From Blood and Ash series, Jennifer Armentrout.
But first, before we get to that very exciting interview, if you enjoy the pod, we would humbly ask that you support us in a few simple ways. First, you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that will let you give us a 5-star review and let us know how much you love our show.
And we'd also love for you to follow us on Instagram at Redirect Podcast. And finally, if you really love the show, please share our show with a friend. Sharing our show with a friend is by far the best way to help us grow our community. And obviously, very exciting things are happening because we just interviewed a #1 New York Times bestselling author. So, oh my God, Emily.
By association, we are also #1 on the New York Times podcast list. I don't make the rules, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, before we get to that, how's things going?
Oh my God. Well, honestly, I am so I've been on so many emotional highs recently. First of all, I'm not finished with Iron Flame, unfortunately, so we can't fully talk about that.
Me either, but I'm close.
Because
but not.
A lot of stuff happened last week. Like, I had a choir concert last week that I was a part of, and that was
amazing.
On Wednesday, and the book came out on Tuesday, and I had my dress, so I couldn't start it till Thursday, and then a bunch of other stuff happened. Like, I'm not even gonna get into all of it, and I'm only reading it, I'm not listening at all, so I'm like 2/3 of the way through. But our next episode, we will have like a dedicated conversation.
Yeah, we must.
But obviously, that's been a lot of emotional highs and lows.
Yeah.
Also, Taylor Swift.
Say no more. Say no more.
I have been having, I had an episode when I started getting all the content about Karma as the guy in the Chiefs. I have to tell you.
Yeah.
My emotional well-being is so unhealthfully tied to this woman. And
I know what you mean. And I didn't even think I cared that much, but I have watched that moment and then her running off the stage. I have watched that from at least 40 different angles. And every time I see it, I watch it again on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, every time I've seen it. And I'm like, I didn't even think I cared, but I really do. I don't know.
I know
She's
you
put
don't
something.
Care too
Yeah.
much. I care so much. And I didn't think I did either, but holy God, I literally feel sick.
Yeah. So a lot of highs, a lot of lows.
So honestly, when people ask me how have you been doing? That I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I have this friend.
A big moment in my life.
Her name is Taylor. It's just been so look. It's been so long since I can parasocially care about Taylor Swift, and who actually cared about Calvin Harris at all. But that was the last time that we had any kind of real content from her relationship wise, honestly, or at all. Like, she's pretty much been quiet, and now all of a sudden we're getting her at football games. We're getting her running into the arms of this extremely tall man. I mean, again, if someone has the romance novel about this that's actually good, please honestly send it to me. I will inject it straight into my veins because I would read it.
I haven't checked, but I'm sure on AO3.
I know there are some. I said a good one. You know who's going to write this though? What's her name? Funny you should ask. And Once More with Feeling. I want to say Elsie, but it's not. Alyssa. Yeah, Sussman.
Alyssa Sussman. Come on the pod.
I know she's working on it. She's got that line going because this is exactly the kind of thing she would write. So I need her too.
It's been a lot. Actually, okay, let me indulge me really quick because whenever they first started dating, one of my friends, Nikki, shout out Nikki if you're listening, posted sent something in our book club Discord and was like, does anybody have a sports romance? Because I need more of this in my life. And then someone said something. So let me find that really quick. But carry on. How have you been? While I look for this, you moved.
I moved. I started a new job today.
Wow.
A lot going on. Like you said, it's also been a lot going on. Taylor Swift, obviously. It was my birthday. Yeah. So
Yes,
I too.
It was your birthday.
Yes. So I too am only about 2/3 of the way through, I'd say. Iron Flame. I'm working as fast as I can, but again, yeah, moving. Birthday,
I think scheduled
new job.
next, we just have like a book talk episode,
and we just talk about Iron Flame.
and we're just gonna we have a lot of stuff to catch up on.
Yes,
there's a lot of things to say, so
we'll
be discussing that.
We will in great detail.
Don't worry. But if you have anything you want us to discuss in the meantime, let us know.
Let us know
at Redirect Podcast on Instagram.
Yes, I was trying to think. I read. Sorry to segue before we get to our interview about sports. Sports. I read this book, sports romance books. I read a book about hockey. It was a hockey romance.
Icebreaker?
And no, not that one. That one's like infamous, I feel. But this one was about it was a neurodivergent girl who ran the social media for this hockey team. And she obviously falls in love with one of the guys. I'm trying to find it.
Okay, while you look for that, here are the recommendations that we got in our group chat from my friend Hannah, Hannah will be joining us for a very exciting episode towards the end of the year. She's amazing at Dollhouse Books on Instagram. But she said, IDK, what sport he plays. LOL. She said, because I'm not up to date.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. But some sporty romances I've liked that maybe you'd want to check out are the Briar U series by Elle Kennedy, Icebreaker by Hannah Grace, The Wall of Winnipeg by Mariana Zapata, and literally any other book by Mariana Zapata. Oh, and the Off-Campus series by Elle Kennedy.
Okay.
I can't endorse
Those are
any
great.
of them, but I trust her implicitly.
Yes. So the one I read was called Always Only You by Chloe Leese. And I liked it, but what's cool about it, and I haven't read the rest of the series, but I'm looking at it and there's actually 7, or there's 6 and 7 that is about to come out, and they all are about different brothers.
Yes, I love that.
So yes, it's very like the Brown sisters.
It's very Bridgerton.
Yes. So it's called the Bergman Brothers series. So that one I read is actually number 2 in the series, but you don't have to obviously read the rest. But that is a hockey romance if you're into that. But again, I want like a famous pop star and an NFL football guy. That's what I'm looking for.
That's what I want. It has to be very traveler coded.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, but back to the point of this show.
Why you're listening to this. We're here to talk to an amazing author, like Abigail said, #1 New York Times bestseller multiple times, Jennifer Armentrout. She writes young adult, paranormal, sci-fi, fantasy, and contemporary romance. She's published with Tor, HarperCollins, Avon, and William Morrow, Entangled Teen and Brazen, Disney, Hyperion, Harlequin Teen, and Blue Box Press. And her most recent book, which we're here to talk to her about today, is A Fire in the Flesh, which is the Fire and Flesh series, book number 3. That's a prequel series to her Blood and Ash series, which you definitely have seen before. So a little bit about that book. The only thing that can save the realms now is the one thing more powerful than the fates. After a startling betrayal ends with both Sarah and the dangerously seductive ruler of the Shadowlands she has fallen madly in love with being held captive by the false king of gods, there is only one thing that can free Nyktos and prevent the forces of the Shadowlands from invading Dalos and igniting a war of primals. Convincing Kolis won't be easy, though, not even with a lifetime of training. While his most favored revenant is insistent that she is nothing more than a lie, Kolis's erratic nature and twisted sense of honor leave her shaken to the core, and nothing could have prepared her for the cruelty of his court or the shocking truths revealed. The revelations not only upend what she has understood about her duty and the very creation of the realms, but also draw into question exactly what the true threat is. However, surviving Colas is only one part of the battle. The Ascension is upon her, and Sarah is out of time. But Niktos will do anything to keep Sarah alive and give her the life she deserves. He'll even risk the utter destruction of the realms. And that's exactly what will happen if he doesn't ascend as the primal of life. Yet, despite his desperate determination, their destinies may be out of their hands. But there is that foreseen, unexpected thread, the unpredictable, unknowable, and unwritten. So that's a little, and I apologize if I mispronounce those things. You know, you just read these words and you have no idea what they sound out loud.
And look, here's the thing. We understand this is the third book of a prequel series of a series that you may never have even read before. But this is a spoiler-free and beginner-friendly interview. Yeah.
Anyways, after listening to this interview, I think you're definitely going to want to pick up the Flesh and Fire series and the Blood and Ash series because it's definitely very intriguing, very exciting. So without further ado, let's welcome to the pod, Jennifer Armentrout.
Woo! The first thing that we ask any guest on our show is to tell us a little bit about your reading preferences. Who are authors that inspire you? What are some of your favorite books? If you had to give us like maybe a top three.
First, thank you guys so much for having me here tonight. Oh gosh, it's so hard to pick like the top three. I think I have to kind of go with books that I read when I was younger that inspired me to be a writer. L.J. Smith, who wrote The Vampire Diaries and The Secret Circle, dating myself all the way back in the 90s. And Joanna Lindsay, you know, the historical romance, old school bodice rippers, basically.
The classics.
But they, and I would say like someone new now, it's always a toss up between like Larissa Ione, J.R. Ward, Sarah Maas, like, you know, they would probably be in there too.
That's great. I think that honestly, for our listeners who are familiar with your work, that makes a lot of sense what you just said. And you can definitely see like your life as a reader coming out in your life as a writer. So I'm glad that we started with that question. So also the reason that you're here, you just released a new book. Tell us about that, about your new release, Third in the Fire and the Flesh, or the Flesh and Fire series.
That's okay. Oh my gosh, you don't even know
you did it to yourself.
I messed up that name. I used to call it The Flame in the Fire, or Fire in the Flame, and I was like, oh well, yeah, there is a fire in the flame. And so I don't even know how that started happening.
You can't even be mad because the third book in the Flesh and Fire series is called A Fire in the Flesh. So, but tell us a little bit about it.
So yes, it's the third book in the series, which is a prequel series to the Blood and Ash series. It picks up where A Light in the Flame left off, like immediately picks up. This book will answer questions that readers may have had while reading, you know, the previous books in the Flesh and Fire, but also questions from the Blood and Ash world. You know, there are going to be things that some people probably expect to see answered that they'll have. And then there's going to be a few, you know, reveals you might not see coming. So there's definitely has a lot of information in it. And, you know, you're going to get to see Sarah, you know, have to kind of find like the inner strength with the situation she's in. And you're going to get to see Colas now for real, because I feel like you only really heard about him and seen brief instances of him, but you're now going to actually get to see him and how his court is. And so, I mean, there's a lot that happens in this book.
Absolutely. So I was wondering, what is it like? Obviously, you're writing, like you said, the Blood and Ash series and kind of this prequel series almost simultaneously, or they're coming out kind of every, you know, back and forth. So what has that been like, kind of writing both series at the same time? Has that been, I mean, I'm impressed how you can keep all that straight in your head, but what has that been like, just kind of writing both while they're not completed series yet?
Well, you know, there's the pro of it, right? That like you're dealing in the same world. And so it's not like you're having to jump into a different like series or anything like that. However, it can get difficult because, you know, you only can retain so much information. Even if it's stuff that I've created, you just can't, you don't have the brain capacity for all that So there's moments where I'm like, oh shit, did this happen in Blood and Ash, or did this happen yet? And then, where you're just like, I don't remember. And so luckily, the copy editors, they create a Bible basically. So anything that really happens, anything major in the series, they add to this Bible. So if I'm not 100% sure, I can refer back to the Bible because it also has like a timeline of events. Because there's moments where I'm like, is this something we knew?
Do you know how many of your readers would love to get their hands on that?
Well, they are getting that basically in February. So Vision is the compendium, and the basis of that was taking the Bible and then retelling it in as Miss Willa retelling.
Oh, awesome!
So making this kind of a little bit boring information because for us it is because it's just like bullet points and telling it in kind of a
putting in a narrative format.
That's interesting.
That's like incredibly valuable though. At my local indie bookstore, there's a whole section of just like reference guides and like appendices for like people who like are that level of fan and need like the timelines, the graphs, the pronunciation guides, all that stuff.
Because it's a lot like for a reader to remember too. It's like, so it's good to be able to refer back to something.
To that point, because we're talking about, writing the prequels at the same time as writing the series, do you, for some of our listeners who's maybe never picked up a book of yours before, do you suggest starting with the prequels, reading in chronological order, or do you have a suggested reading order?
There is a suggested reading order. However, it really, like, if you're now just starting to read, I would think take the suggested reading order and throw it out the window because, when the suggested reading order is done, it's done thinking that you've already read like the Blood and Ash. So what you could do is you could start with Flesh and Fire because the last book in that series will come out, before the next Blood and Ash book does. So, you could, read that and then start the Blood and Ash. Now, by doing that, it's going to probably give you a leg up on some events in the Blood and Ash world where you would start being like, oh, this is starting to sound familiar. Like, I think this was, set up in Flesh and Fire. So that would be my suggestion. But ultimately, if you wanted to start with From Blood and Ash, you could do that. And I think that, like, once you got to, like, the War of Two Queens or the Crown of Gilded Bones, I would then read, like, the books that are available in the Flesh and Fire series before you read the War of Two Queens, because there's going to be some characters you're going to be introduced to that you will recognize from that series.
So I'm really glad you said that because that kind of segues into what I wanted to ask you next. So you've alluded to this a little bit, like being able to keep things straight, but how do you manage some of the big plot twists, like when you are designing the plot for the prequel series? When you know that the readership already knows what happens in the quote unquote future, like the future of this world. So for instance, keeping it spoiler free, but without naming any characters, let's say if one of the characters appears to die in the prequel series, but the readers know from the main series that this person didn't die because there was a child that was born from them, or there was some other effect of their life. How does that process work in your mind about like keeping the plot twists and the big reveals interesting for the readers when they know like a reflection of what happens in the future?
Yeah. And that's like the one thing with the Flesh and Fire series is that like, well, obviously like certain people have to make it out of this, right? for there to be whatever. But I think where the interest comes in excitement is that you don't know how. Because the odds seem so stacked against this happening. But then there's also things in the Blood and Ash world that really don't hinder so much on certain characters being alive. But you're like, why is it this way? Like, why is it this one character not known? And then there's that I think people are also searching for, is learning, like, what was it about that caused this? But also there's always like the plot twist, right? But then there are these little tiny ones that I don't think the reader really sees coming. And sometimes they don't even catch it on the first read through, or they catch it on the next book. And they're like, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. And then they go back and it's actually there. That I think is also what keeps it going, is because you just don't know how this worked out.
Right.
I think those are almost sometimes the more interesting plot twists anyways, like those sneaky little ones that you're not expecting. Like sometimes okay, I have a feeling there's a huge plot twist coming, but then the authors can sucker punch you with another one before you even get to that one. So
it's like a little wink from the author. You're like, this is for the people who really catch it. And it's like cool if you don't catch it, like you'll still enjoy the books. And if you just want to like read through once, whatever. But there's those, do you feel like you have that relationship with your fans where it's like, oh, this will be fun. Like, let's see if they pick this up.
Oh yeah, definitely. So in the Facebook group of Jaylanders, where a lot of the readers kind of hang out is, I'll sometimes give them hints for things to look, like Easter eggs, like things to look to. But yeah, like they always have like their theories and like their speculation of what's going to happen. And sometimes they're on point, like to the point where you're like, damn, they got that. Other times what they're saying doesn't happen, but it's such a good idea that I'm like, why didn't I?
Maybe I should.
Yeah, shit. And then
so
other times that, like, I'm like, yeah, what book were you reading?
So you're saying like fans should like lurk in Reddit threads and put like, manifest things that they want. Like put it out into the world and maybe it will come back to you because maybe Jennifer L. Armentrout will read your Reddit.
I wish that would be the case because unfortunately though, like the ones that I'm like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. It's like I've already gone too far down the other direction that it would make sense. But it's like some of them, their theories are so good that I'm like, I hope you eventually write yourself, right? Like, because like that's not going to happen in this book. But it's I like reading that kind of stuff because it is interesting to see them kind of connect.
I always wish more authors would expand their worlds like you have, like. It's just so great. You get attached to the characters or the world, and then it's just over in one book or two books. So what in particular has drawn you to continue to write within the same worlds? I think you've done that multiple times throughout your career. So, like, what is it that draws you to doing that?
Well, I think with other series, it's because, like, you get to explore the characters more, too. Like, one thing, because ultimately at the end of the day, I write romance. And one thing I find when you're writing a series that's a romance, there's almost like this formula of where like the couple in the first book spend the first book realizing they might like each other. The second book they get together, but they're split up at the end of the second. Trust me, I do it myself. Then the third book, half the book they're not together, and then they get together. Then the series ends, right? So it's like, oh, I didn't even get to spend any time with them together. And I like it when you get to see the couple together facing things together, obstacles together. Versus the, that formula of feeling almost like you didn't get to see them working together. So that's one aspect of it. And another is like when you're working in the same, especially when you're working in fantasy. Fantasy, there are a lot of tropes in fantasy, right? However, fantasy, there's a lot of similar tropes through all the fantasy books because of just how the genre is kind of designed. So if you're writing a new fantasy and you already have fantasy series, it can be very difficult to build a whole other additional world that is, that doesn't
work.
Fool everything because there's a lot that you can do with writing, right? But when you get down to the nitty gritty, if you're writing in a similar type of fantasy, you do start to limit a little bit. So I think sometimes staying in the same world, but you're expanding it to where it almost feels like you are in a different world can help it stay new and fresh. And, for both you as the author and the reader. Yes.
I want to pick out something that you just said about tropes in fantasy and romance and romantasy. Through your series, you employ some really fun tropes. Friends to lovers, you have enemies to lovers, you have arranged marriage / marriage of convenience. What is your favorite to read and what is your favorite to write?
My favorite to read and favorite to write is the same, is enemies to lovers. That is always my favorite because it gives a chance for a lot of banter. And, I love writing banter. I love reading it. And that just sets the groundwork. And, one thing with writing, every genre has tropes, right? Like if it's mystery, suspense, thrillers, they all have their own set of tropes underneath them. And like, you know, I will say, like, I feel like romance probably has the most tropes that you can go with.
Yeah.
But enemies to lovers, I just always find that just, you know, the best of them.
Just drugs.
Yeah, and I like the push and pull effect that you can get with that, like where, especially when you start off like where one or both characters really do not like each other. It's fun like that.
So Emily and I have talked before about the tension and the difference between like truly enemies to lovers and rivals to lovers, and the difference between like sometimes you read a book and the people are so mean to each other, you're like, to start, you're like, how could you ever fall in love? And so we like to say rivals to lovers more than enemies to lovers, because you still want there to be that like
the tension. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think though, it's like you can have characters who genuinely do not like one another, or like maybe are plotting to kill the other one. You know, like something like that, right?
Wink, wink.
Right. But there is a limit. I mean, this is me personally. And this is not the same for every author or what you like to read, but for me, there is a fine line you walk.
Yeah.
Because yes, there are like, you know, like, look, one of my things I will read sometimes is bully romance, right? I've read a couple of them, and you know, only a couple of them, because some of them, you know, kind of there's that fine line where it's like, someone needed to call the police here.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, where that is just like, so where certain things are done, where you can no longer suspend reality, I guess, in the situation. So I do think it requires a fine walking of a line. Now, here's the thing though. Dark romance exists for a reason, where that line is kind of obliterated and then, you know, goes beyond. But like, I do think if, you know, depending on what you like to write, what you like to read, there is a fine line that you have to navigate there.
Yeah. Before I totally agree. And, you're right. It's like, if you're going to go one way or the other, I feel the same way. Like either it's going to be a dark romance or it's going to be enemies to lovers, or, you know, whatever. Before we move on, I wanted to ask another specific question about the Fire and the Flesh series. So Poppy and Sierra obviously have a lot of similarities, which is really cool. And it's a really cool wrinkle in the universe. I think it's something your readers have really, really enjoyed. Both of them are kind of learning about the magic of the world, and like there are things that are being revealed to them through the story. And from a reader's perspective, I think that's a cool way of trying to also teach the reader about the world and build the world without just being like, here's 4 huge blocks of text about like the rules of this universe and like, you know, what is a primal and what is a god and what is a court and all that stuff. So from your perspective as an author who already knows all the rules of the world, like, is it hard to hold yourself back from just kind of dumping all that information up at first? Or do you enjoy the pursuit of educating the reader through also educating the main character?
Yeah, because it can be hard, like, not just to be like, let me get this out of the way, you know, and like set this type of setting or reveal something that often will change like the course of the series or the characters. So it can be hard to do that sometimes. And, you know, I feel like for most readers that, you know, well, for writers, there's 2 ways to do it. It's like where you drop the reader into an established world where all the characters are established and they know everything. And, you know, that can be a little bit more difficult in high fantasy because, again, you know, you take into consideration that the reader is now learning this world while trying to learn these characters, while also trying to follow a plot. It can be a lot if you're unfamiliar with everything, right? So that's one of the techniques of, you know, kind of having them discover or pull back things as the reader does. So I like that technique with fantasy, especially if it has like a lot of world building in it, is just because it becomes a lot for a person who's reading to follow.
And to stay engaged with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because eventually you're kind of like, you check out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, I don't know how to say these people's names. I don't know what bloodline they are. I don't know where we are. Like, yeah. And so you just kind of, this is too much.
Yeah. Yeah, Abigail and I are pretty recent fantasy converts, I think. And so, yeah, there are definitely different types of fantasy books that are just probably too much for our like infant fantasy brains. But then some of them, like you're describing, if it comes a little at a time, it makes it a little easier to get into it. And then once you're into it, it's like, okay, bring it on. So speaking of your world building, we wanted to ask about your process of world building. Like, do you kind of talk things out with your friends, or do you have some kind of visualization or, timeline or writing things down? What's kind of your process behind that?
So a lot of it, like, I'm not a heavy plotter other than like, I know how stuff begins, like where like the middle part would be and how things end. That I know. A lot of the stuff that happens in between come to me as I'm writing. I cannot like sit down for any amount of time and plot out an entire book or series, like every little aspect of it, other than knowing like the overall reaching arcs of the series. I am envious of people who can do that, who can do like 60, 70 page like outlines. If I did that, I would be like, well, I don't want to write the book now because I feel like I just wrote something, So, but for me, also doing it this way, it gives me a little bit of freedom to kind of surprise myself with what I can come up with. But yeah, like there are times when you get stuck, like even if it's a part that you plan that you're writing and you're like, I don't think this makes sense. So, depending, with your editor, you will like, talk, kind of hash it out with them. And it's really good if you can hash it out with the editor, because ultimately they're the ones who are kind of in this with you. And so they know a lot about what you're writing, even more so than your friends. Like, and of course, like sometimes you're going to have friends who are like really love doing that. And then you're going to have the friends who are like, please stop talking. Like,
Yeah.
Like they're just like, this just no, because I even have like people who are friends that are huge readers, but they are not like, they can't do that plotting thing, right? They can't, their brain does not work that way. Yeah. And for me,
they just want you to tell it to them.
Yeah.
Like what happens.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, that sounds good. I'm like, but it doesn't, so like their brains just don't dig in like that. And
Sure.
so it really helps when you have it like a good relationship with an editor that you can, go back and forth with them. But, really for me, it's always like, when I have to have like whenever I need to talk to my editor about something is like, I need to have, fully understand what the problem is. Cause like when you're writing, like sometimes, there's a problem, like, like there's a problem, but I don't know what it is. And that's not a good time to really talk to anybody because you're going to get your head all messed up because they're going to think it's something else that you thought was fine. And then now you're
then you're going to get even more insecure about it.
Yeah. You're going to be like, oh man. So it's like, for me, it's like, I have to really know like when, like it is like what the problem is before I really start like doing hey, can we talk this out?
Speaking of plotting things out and coming up with ideas, is it true that you got the idea for Blood and Ash during the 2016 Olympics?
Yes.
Do you remember what event?
Probably gymnastics. I think that's the only one I really watch.
Right.
Olympics I end up paying attention to because it just fascinates me that someone can
do that with their body
to like propel themselves feet into the air. Like that's just insane to me. But yeah, I got the idea while I was watching the Olympics. I have no idea. Other than the Olympics being Greek started, in my series having a lot of Greek inspiration or Greek myth. I have no idea how that happened. But that's the thing, like people always ask, like, how do you get your inspirations? And that's an answer, right? It makes no sense. It just pops in your head. Like sometimes it's the Olympics, sometimes it's a commercial, a song, a TV, like something. It just comes out of everything and nothing at all. And so like that's when the idea started to pop in my head for some reason. I do not know, but it is weird.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Greek myth because this was something else in our outline. I wanted to ask you about how Greek mythology informs your world building, specifically the politics and the romance of the gods and primals. And like, how much, if any, inspiration do you derive from that?
I have always been fascinated with Greek mythology. I think it's some of the out of the most world myths that you could ever read. Sometimes it leaves you wondering, like, what in the world were they on when they wrote this? Because this is wow. Um, so I do have, a lot of inspiration, but sometimes it's not very obvious. It's not very like in your face. Like well-known myths, for example, or legends. Um, sometimes it's like, a bit of the politics, um, or like the hierarchy of gods, for example. You can see in Roman or Grecian type. So I do pull the inspiration from there. Then there's some myths that I've kind of have in the books that I flipped a little bit. But I feel like if that you may see like, oh, I wonder if this was inspired by that. But I've always been obsessed with Greek mythology. I mean, down to the point that obviously Atlantia is Atlantis. Like, I'm playing off that myth, and of Atlantis, and because that's something that even though historically it's very unlikely anything like that existed, and more likely that there was an island or something that existed beyond something that likely had like earthquakes or something. And then over the years, that myth was built up and built up. But there is something interesting about the idea that there was like this other place that was so more advanced, and what happened to them. And that also kind of played a role in developing, Atlantia, and how, in that world that they were, more advanced and soulless, And so you see the inspiration coming in there.
Yeah, sometimes, to your point, like Greek myth is so built up, and there's so much content and like literature and media that is derives from it. Sometimes it's hard to remember that it's myth.
And then
you're not like, oh, Achilles, like real guy,
Yeah, and then you have Atlantis, right? That Disney literally has caused everybody to think that Atlantis is a place under the sea where people are like half fish, I guess, and live in a bubble. No, those people, if that was real, they all died. Let's get spanked. They didn't move down there. I've always, like, every time you bring up Atlantis, everyone's like, oh, the city under the sea. No, you mean the ruins that existed underneath the sea. They didn't just peace out and go live in a bubble. The myth was like, there was different versions of it, but pretty much it didn't end well for them. Like, it just all collapsed. But
right, it's similar vibes to like Pocahontas.
Yeah,
the ending is
like, oh, as a kid, you're like, oh wow, and then as an adult, you're like, oh no. Like, yeah, so I mean, right. But it's a lot like that. I feel like with a lot of, especially I feel like, I don't know your age, but I feel like a lot of times in like my age group, it's like things that, you saw as a kid or something. And then, a lot wasn't shared about it. Like, we didn't have access at the fingertips as a child or even a young adult. Internet was just getting started. And then, but now it's like, you look back and you're like, oh no, that wasn't how that happened. Yeah. And then you're kind of like, well, there goes everything in your childhood.
That's accurate. Kind of switching gears a little bit. I think many readers would describe your style saying you never waste a page, and you're definitely great at writing that dialogue and building up that tension to kind of further the plot. So, can you talk a little bit more about your use of dialogue and what kind of draws you to that sort of method of furthering the plot, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I'm so glad to hear that people are like, you never waste a page, because I'm like, oh, thanks.
Your books are like 600 pages plus, so
pages in there.
That's
but like, that's very flattering. And I feel like, as most authors, we always wonder, like, is this information people are going to be interested in? And the funny thing is, it's always things that are completely unrelated to the plot that readers really like grab onto. And it's like, it's those little things. But like, one thing I learned when I first started writing seriously was, and I don't know if this was Stephen King or somebody else, who said that each chapter should have like mini cliffhangers. Like when you get to the end of chapter, you want to be forced to keep reading. Now, you of course can't do that with every chapter, but employing that technique does make it a bit of a page turner, because like there's a bunch of mini cliffhangers happening consistently throughout the book, which also kind of sets the pacing, right? So the pacing then goes in. But one of the things that I do feel is important is dialogue, even in a fantasy, especially in a fantasy, because I want the readers to still be able to relate to the characters that are in a world that they don't recognize, and be able to see themselves in those characters or in that world. And I think that with having like realistic dialogue helps make that possible. And it also opens up again for banter, the back and forth between characters. And, it's like, I love the TV show Supernatural. And one thing that I loved that you would find in that show is like things would be going sideways, right? Like Lucifer's coming up ground again for some reason, like Crawley's running around. And then somebody always has like the world's ending, but somebody's going to say something hilarious. Like they're just going to be that person who, that's how they cope in situations like that. Like Buffy was another one that did it very well. And that's something that I tend to do in my stuff too, because I feel like those are grounding moments that allow you to kind of like take a breather. But also, again, like I feel like we all know somebody who is that person. Like they're the person that you don't want to be sitting next to at a funeral, because you know damn well they're going to say something so inappropriate that is going to make you laugh, and you're going to be like, now everybody's looking at us like we're assholes and it was your fault. And those, I feel like with the dialogue, that's where you get to really explore those types of characters. And again, it makes it like way more relatable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, like we were saying, like sometimes, a book can be 300-400 pages and feel so long. And then some books can be close to 1,000 and you just fly through it. And I do think dialogue definitely plays a big role in that. If it's like really snappy or gripping conversations, you feel like it flies by a lot faster and you're more invested in the story and in the characters for sure.
I also think that about like I recently, I won't name the book, but I read a book for my book club that was in second person point of view, and it was not a ton of dialogue, a lot of the characters' thoughts, and it was kind of divisive in our book club. Like this is the people who like more of a character study liked the book a lot more, and people who like more plot driven novels didn't like it as much. And I think I'm suspicious that dialogue has a lot to do with that, with keeping the pace up.
Really kind of strange to hear, because typically with second person POV, a lot of people tend to feel like they don't get to know the character as well as you do in first person, because depending on how second person is written, is either written as like where it's somebody telling a story, right? Or then it's written as deep second person. I think this what they call it, deep POV, where it's really like reading first person. It's just that you're using he or she, whatever. But yeah, like that would be interesting, just because like usually you hear the opposite of that with that sometimes the first person will have like, a lot of introspection. Like, and even as a writer, you have to be aware of that. Like, sometimes like when I'm writing, I'll have to be like, okay, how many paragraphs has this person been thinking? Like, and kind of being aware of that.
Yeah.
Because, you can get on a roll and then not realize, oh, wait a minute. It'll be like an action scene or a conversation is taking place, but there's like a page of like deep thoughts between that response. And you're like, okay. And I've done that. And then I've had to go back and be like, okay, wait a minute, Jen. I would have completely forgot what that person said after thinking all that shit. Like, I would have been like, I have no idea what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you have to kind of catch yourself when you do that, because you're like, that's not how a person actually thinks.
So, I guess, okay, you keep on giving those great segues. So you're putting yourself into your writing. Like, do I understand? Like, would I get that if I was a reader? How do you feel that you put your own identities into your writing and into your characters? Like, how do you as Jen show up in your characters and like some of your identities?
A lot of times, like more of my personality almost always shows up in the male lead characters. Like just because like
Interesting.
in the real world, I probably, I have more of that kind of often sometimes dry sense of humor, or, will, have like, you know, like be the person who's thinking something, even though I might not say it. Like, like when something happens where not mean or anything, but like when you're like, again, I'll use the funeral example. It's like where it pops, you're just sitting there like thinking the most just inane stuff. And that kind of like manifests a little bit. But I do put little things of me in some of the characters. Like with Sarah, her like issues with anxiety and depression, are things that I have struggled with,
Mm-hmm.
and also before I went to school for psychology, and that's the field I worked in for a time. So it's something that I have experience in on both sides. So I like to sometimes explore that. Um, I do think you have to be careful of how much you do of yourself put into a book character, because that can cause like reviews or people talking about it to start to feel personal. So I do think that's
Ah,
something you're not always aware of. Like when you're first starting out, that, oh, this may cause this to begin to feel like a personal attack when it's not, because they don't know that you basically
yeah.
wrote yourself into a book, so the reader don't know that. Yeah.
That's a really
Yeah,
good
and it's
point
something
that
that
I've never
honestly
thought
you
of.
don't even realize, I feel like, until you have a couple books underneath your belt, kind of where you're kind of like you have to be a little bit careful of how much of yourself you do put in there. But it's always good, I think, to pull from things that you actually have experience with, because I think that makes it a bit more believable to people, and they can then connect more so with certain things.
All right, so now we have a couple more questions with our remaining time about book talk and kind of going viral on TikTok. So I guess what is it like having a book or a series go viral on TikTok? I mean, we're both on BookTok or Bookstagram, and you definitely can't scroll too far without finding one of your books turning up. So what has that experience been like? And it's been a few. I think I saw an older interview when Blood and Ash had first kind of really gone viral on TikTok. But now that it's been a few years, kind of what's it like? And do you engage with any of that at all? Yeah. So what's that like?
So, I feel like it's very surreal, like when something does go viral, because if you're usually like me, you have no idea it's going viral. Like until, because somebody else in the community will say, oh, because like I'll say of Blood and Ash, it started with, another author friend being like, oh my gosh, like they are really like, I they're talking about your book a lot on BookTok. And then I was like, okay, well, of course you're an author or a reader. You're going to see that, right? But then, some time will go by and you would get a couple times, but then you start getting people who in real life that probably are not following like book talkers like that everybody in the book community follows, right? That's when I think for myself, it really was like, okay, maybe I need to go check this out. Because like I don't know, because I wasn't even on TikTok at that time. And I was briefly on TikTok for a period, but I couldn't stay on the app because it's not very vision friendly. Like, you can't maximize, you can't see shit. You got vision problems. So it just became too much for me to try to interact with on TikTok. But it was, I feel like that day that, I went and looked at it, or I had a friend go look at it who had a TikTok, and, you put the hashtag in and it shows you how many times the hashtag's used. And I mean, it was millions of times. And we both were like, what? It's like, it was like, oh, holy shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and
That's
I have
crazy.
been very, very lucky in my career that like my career in YA originally kicked off because back then book bloggers were the book talk. They
Mhm.
were the ones who were online on Blogger, Twitter, Tumblr, Goodreads, talking about books. And I know I'm throwing out names that the youngins are going to be like, what? What's a blogger? I don't even know if bloggers still exist, to be honest with you. It makes me want to Google that.
Right. Like
Yeah.
Zanga.
I did hear Tumblr was making a comeback.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Unfortunately, the teens are like romanticizing like mentally ill Tumblr
I guess they
names,
got
and,
tired
like,
with that on
you guys
TikTok.
don't.
And
Yeah.
let me go over to Tumblr because it's a lot easier to fake something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have fallen down those rabbit holes and just been like, oh my, like no, like this is not how we do this. Like this is not helping anybody. But like, yeah, so I was very lucky because they got behind my books, and started supporting them, and it was word of mouth. It was organic, and that happened again with the Blood and Ash series. It was something that I had nothing to do with. My publishers had nothing to do with, and it just took off. And I mean, that is the type of stuff that is extremely difficult to happen at all in your career, or for it to repeat itself. And you can't recreate that, right? You can't force that. Either it happens or it doesn't. And it's still something that I'm so like in awe of, because it's truly word of mouth. And I know over the last couple of months or year or so, it's like, I feel like the focus has gotten a bit negative. I feel like with BookTok, like where people are talking negatively about it. And it's like,
about getting like bad
or
recommendations,
just hating on BookTok, which I feel like you see a lot of now on other sites, or and it's like every time I want to be like, guys, like this is the internet. Like there is always going to be easy periods of time. There's always going to be rougher periods of time, but like I don't think that undercuts all that BookTok and the same with book bloggers have done for the genres, right? Because these were just people talking about the books they love, and they still are. And, they are, spreading that with hundreds of thousands and millions in some case of people. So it's like, I do wish when people like something will happen on BookTok, and 9 times out of 10, I have no idea what's happening because again, I'm not on it. And and again, if you've been in the community for a long time, that something is really kicked off when it starts crossing social media platforms. Like if it's just on BookTok or just on Facebook, like it doesn't matter. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's probably not that big of a deal because it hasn't now jumped social media platforms. And again, if you've been around long enough, the moment you see that shit jump into the platform, you're like, uh-oh. It's like now it's going viral. Like, and and again, it's like, I think human nature on all sides of that conversation, we tend to focus a bit more on the negative stuff. That's human nature. But I think it's always good to remember that, like, many of us, wouldn't be sitting where we are today if it wasn't for readers getting online or getting on a podcast or, getting on TikTok, writing a blog, talking about your book. So it's like, to me, that makes it easier just to kind of cancel out like all the other noise that happens, that people act like it only ever happens on one site. And it's like, have you been on the internet? Like,
that's all it is.
Like Tumblr back in the day too. Yeah.
Right. And for all the bad, I also feel like, I assume that most of your readership are younger women. But it seems like it's this safer corner of the internet for like girls to just like girl stuff.
It is too, like a place where you can love, like, I feel like romance for the longest time has had to fight, right? The stigma of romance. And we still are fighting that. There is not a day that ends in Y that there's not somebody who decided to read a book that came out in 1983 that probably had Fabio, and no knock against him on the cover, but that's like they're somehow out of everything that's heard, that's the book they find. And, then does a whole entire thesis on romance. And and we're still, I think, combating that. And BookTok helped pull back a lot of that stigma, right? The romance side, they were pretty much like, we can read this. Yeah. Like, there's nothing to be ashamed of. And, and
we can read what we like, and that's it. Like, we don't need to moralize that. Like, we don't need to read nonfiction all the time.
Yeah, the classics.
Like I like reading. Like, I like reading romantasy. I love reading historical romance. Like, I just want to be cozy and like kick my feet and like, enjoy.
Yeah, and you want. I mean, and I think that's why fiction books are so important, because they can provide you an escape just because you need one, but they also can provide people an escape that really need something.
Yeah,
to take them, away for a little bit. And I think that's so important.
I think that is a lovely way to end the interview. We
Yes,
are
very.
gonna read what you love here, and it has been an absolute joy to chat with you. Where can readers buy your book? Everywhere?
Pretty much.
Wherever books.
What else do you want them to do?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's wherever the books are sold. It's available everywhere except for like where they've been translated.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us today. And again, you can find her books anywhere that books are sold. So Abigail, before we wrap up, do you want to share any books you've been reading recently?
Okay.
I don't think, anyway, since we last talked. Let me look at my
Iron
list.
Flame. God, I cannot wait for us to really talk about it. How far along are you?
Pretty far. Sorry, pretty far. I don't want to say what's happening because I'm afraid I'm going to be farther than you. But pretty far, I would say definitely 2/3. We're probably very similar along.
Are you in part 2?
Yes.
Have you turned the page into part 2?
I believe yes.
Okay.
I haven't read anything. The last thing I read before this was The Woman in Me.
Okay, cool. Well, let me tell you, I have gotten just sucked down this crazy rabbit hole of the Bridgerton prequels and spin-off series.
Amazing.
And there's like, the thing is, it's drugs because these are short. They're old, so they're like readily available at the library. I got them like on Kindle and audio, and I've been like last week I finished one like every single day. Like I just ripped through them. And I just love it. Like it's just comforting. Julia Quinn, like you always know it's going to work out, which is amazing. You have the historical element, which I love. And it's just like, it's so like romantic. She just kills it. And I have been getting super excited about season 3 of Bridgerton, which unfortunately keeps getting pushed. I think they finally announced it's like May of next year. But it was just like I was in a mood and I needed it. So if there are any Bridgerton fans out there who would like to read the prequels are the Rokesby books. My favorite of the Rokesby books was the first one because of Miss Bridgerton. Highly recommend that. And then if you end up reading the Smythe-Smith Quartet, my favorite of the Smythe-Smith Quartet was Just Like Heaven. So highly recommend. And honestly, dream guest for this podcast would be Julia Quinn. I would lose it.
The fame's going to our heads, honestly.
Yeah, the fame is going to our heads. Now I'm like, anything's possible. She literally like... But you know what I will say? So from my little free library, I got Queen Charlotte by Julia Quinn and Shonda Rhimes. And I loved the show, but this book was written after the show. Like the show was written first. And it was just literally all of the same dialogue. There was nothing different. And I think for me, that didn't work so much. I was like, oh, like I can read the book that it's based on, but I want there to be something different or me to get something a little bit extra or something more. Yeah. So I didn't end up thinking that it was really worth my time to finish that one. But yeah, I've just been in a Bridgerton swirl. And also I have something to tell you.
Tell me.
My book club for like our Christmas or like our holiday meeting, we are reading, there is a Talia Hibbert Christmas novella.
What is it?
It's called Wrapped Up in You by Talia Hibbert.
Okay.
And I think it's like 200 pages or something like it's very short, but I was like, need.
Okay. I'm adding that to my cart.
You're there.
Yes. I am reading it already.
Season pass. Like Talia Hibbert Christmas.
No, she can do no wrong. Yeah.
I love that.
Amazing. Yeah.
Any other book news we need to cover?
Probably. Tune in next time in 2 weeks when we have our book talk episode and we are more less going through so many life changes and more coherent.
Yeah, we've been going through a lot.
Yeah.
I found a lost dog last week.
I saw that on Twitter. It was so cute.
It was so cute, but Pepper's a hater.
Literally, though, that was like, I was not prepared for how cute the picture of the dog would be. But
listen, it found its mom.
That's good.
We found the owner, which is good.
Oh, so, good. Even better.
Yeah, it got back to its owner, and apparently the dog had pneumonia, and she had nursed it back to health, and so, anyways, it was really.
It worked out. Yeah,
it was a dog sitter that left the back door open.
I would sue. I would literally
What's worse,
sue.
that happening to you or you being the dog sitter?
No, and I would die. There's no other option but to turn yourself into the federal prison, honestly. Wow.
Anyways. All right, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode.
Thank you. Bye.